Bryan, have a seat, make yourself comfortable.
Well, thank you all for having me.
How one things at the governor's office?
It's, you know, each level is very stressful. Obviously, every time I come before you, I'm very welcoming. I'm still nervous. That level, the nervousness goes up a little bit higher. It was a great experience. You know, I met with Dan Nordby, Ms. Sasso. Very welcoming. They asked very direct questions, criminal questions, which I appreciated. They showed they were very interested in the process, which I appreciated, and I just gave them my honest answers. You know, it flies by, I will say that. You get in, it feels like you're done like that.
What'd you learn from the process that may aid you if we were to send you a second time?
You know, when I went through the process, I treated it the same way I treat this process. Every time I've been through this commission, you've raised valid concerns or valid questions for me, and I think I've strived each time to take those and learn from that and implement that. And I don't know if there was anything that they said that I needed to work on necessarily. I think I answered their questions directly. I don't know if there was a question that I answered that they said, well, we would have liked you to answer a different way. I answered every question the way they asked it. I will say that, you know, especially with the criminal questions, I've looked at that and I've, you know, thought about it, but quite honestly, I would not have changed my answers. It's the same answer I would have this time. I answered you know, honestly, so it would be the same answer. And again, it was, you know, they asked very good questions, you know, questions about constitutional issues. Was there a case I disagreed with? You know, they asked questions, you know, concerning pro se parties. If you had a pro se party in a criminal matter, how would you handle it if that person, you know, missed a deadline? They asked questions of, you know, young attorneys. If you're in a criminal matter and you have a young prosecutor or young public defender who missed something, would you advise that attorney that they missed something? And I answered truthfully to all of those, you know, to the way I would rule.
And how would you rule?
You know, with the constitutional issue, the case that came to mind was the Gallatin versus Broward County case, where it was the issue of use a rational basis test on the cap on personal injury, non-economic damages. And with that one, I agreed with Judge Polston in the sense that in that specific case, I would not necessarily go against the legislature, just because I don't want to get into a role of overstepping my bounds as a judge. And I believe in that case, they probably should have used a rational basis test to look at that case. With the criminal matters, with respect to a pro se party, I made it clear to Mr. Nordby that I would obviously make sure that the person knew their rights and we followed the law to ensure they had a right to counsel. But if the person chose not to get counsel, unfortunately at a certain point, you know, that's going to be their decision. I want to make sure everyone's got their proper due process, everyone's got a right to counsel, everyone understands they have a right to counsel, and make sure that they fully understand that right. But at a certain point, if they don't take that right and they don't have counsel and they choose to proceed through their own recourse, you know, I wouldn't go against the law to say, you know, I'm sorry you screwed up, and even though this is the law, you know, I'm going to give you a break. I just wouldn't do that. I would make sure at the front end they understood. Same answer with a young attorney. I said it's, you know, it's unfortunate with, you know, young attorneys, and I would do my best, obviously, to make sure they, you know, I'm sure they understood and they do it, but at a certain point, it may become an ineffective assistance of counsel. I'm obviously not going to go out of my way. I understand young attorneys. I was a young attorney. I've never got out of my way to say, you know, oh, you screwed up, but if at a certain point there was something that, you know, was done incorrectly, I wouldn't overstep my bounds as a judge to say that, you know, anything I couldn't do to try to correct that. If there was a way to correct it within my authority, I would, you know, obviously try to help out, but I wouldn't go above that to help out. It's just not proper, I don't think.
But on the pro se, what about this situation? Because the criminal one, I think, is a little bit more clear.
Yeah.
But the more likely one that you may face, if you're appointed, is two pro se family law litigants. that are missing deadlines and not trying to enter evidence the right way, but there's a child, and you have the best interest of the child, and somebody might be trying to give you evidence that is important in how you're ruling. They're not giving it to you correctly, and you have a child that sometimes literally their safety could be at risk. How do you handle that one? Because there isn't a public defender you can say, hey, you should get a public defender, sir. You should get a public defender.
No, absolutely. I would never, obviously my goal is to get to the full evidence. I want all of the evidence, and I would never go out of my way to say, you missed a deadline, the evidence is not allowed in. To the extent it's permissible by law, I would allow the evidence in. I think with certain situations, you need to hear the evidence. If it were a situation where all the deadlines were missed, again, within my parameters as a judge, whatever I'm allowed to do as a judge, I would do, but to make sure all the evidence is to fairly weigh the situation, what I would not do is I would not go against the law to say, here was a deadline, everyone had their opportunity, and I'm just going to make a new deadline if I'm not allowed to do that. But I think it's important to hear the evidence. And honestly, in pro se matters, it's not to the same extent as a family law matter, but I have it all the time with arbitrations. And I have some of those in arbitrations where I see folks and they have the right to an attorney, and I say, gosh, if this person had an attorney, this would probably go a lot differently, because they would have someone there, they would present this properly. I hear all the evidence. I will say in those matters, I don't exclude evidence. If someone says, here's a pile of documents, I look through them. I think you have to look through them, and that's part of, I'm allowed to do that, and I do that. I make sure I hear all the evidence. But as far as procedurally going through and maybe at the end missing certain things, sometimes things get missed. And unfortunately, I can't control that. I wish everyone would have assistance of counsel and go through that. And again, my goal is to make sure I have all the evidence I'm allowed to get. I'm not going to exclude it on a technicality. I would only exclude it if it were something where it would be a reversible error for me to take it.
Well, piggybacking on that a little bit, what if you've got the same situation, but one side has got an excellent attorney and the, say, mother of the child doesn't know how to get the evidence in?
Honestly, it's a situation, I think it's a situation a lot of judges face. I think it breaks your heart as a parent. I think it breaks your heart as a person. To the extent it's permissible to let the evidence in, again, I would let it in. But at a certain point, if the person chooses or can't get an attorney, I just wouldn't make a decision that goes against the law. It's a reversible error where I say, what, even though I know as a person, as a parent, as everything that we've got to get it in. If it's going to be a reversible error, I'm not going to do it. And I hate to say that, but it's the truth. If it's something where I have discretion and I can say, what, we can let this in, I will let it in, hear the evidence, and then I'll weigh it appropriately.
Brian, I don't know if it's the right answer at the governor's office, but if it comes up in real life, IRL, I think the family law judges are excellent, and I only sort of tiptoe into their courtroom every now and then, but I see someone like a Karen Foxman, whether both sides are represented, one side is or neither side, turn to the parent testifying and say, no one's asked you this, but I need to know this piece of evidence, and I don't know if it's technically proper or not, but it cuts through a lot of, they cut through a lot and ask questions themselves, and I see them be able to make such better decisions than sitting back and waiting for someone to fumble their way.
And I agree with that. I think to the extent it's permissible and I'm allowed, I do that as an arbitrator. I would ask questions. My goal is to get the evidence in. I don't want to be so rigid where I say, you missed a deadline, it's not coming in. My line is, okay, if I let this evidence in or this piece in, it goes against the law, it's a reversible error. To the extent it's asking questions, to the extent it's saying, I don't have an attorney, here are my exhibits, and I can take those, I'll take those, and I'll wait. I think it's important to get to the full truth and look at it through the process.
Let me ask you, just by virtue of math, we have more people who've applied than our 6 spots to send up to the governor. So, someone who's gone up before is not going to get to go up again, just by virtue of the numbers. What makes you stand apart that you deserve to be in this group of 6?
I think the one thing I have done to stand myself apart is it's the same process through this. Again, every piece of advice that you all have given me, being more active, which I appreciate, regardless of whether you put me up or I go again, I'm thankful for that. I've been active in all the local bars. I'm continuing to do that. But the piece of advice at that level is more of the connections and the political and knowing folks, and I've made a point to keep that up. I'm not the political person who knows everybody, and I wish I did, I don't, but I've done it on my own, and I've met with Maury Hosseini. I've made those contacts. I'm the one who took the initiative to reach out to those folks to say, hey, can I talk to you? And they agreed. I've made connections. I think I've got good support, and I've got good community support, and it's the same thing I've told Dan Nordby. I said part of this process is the re-election process. This is long-term for me, and I think it's very important for the credibility of this commission, myself, and Tallahassee, that whoever gets in the position can actually get re-elected. And that's the other thing I've worked on, is through Daytona contacts, through all the community contacts I have. I've tried to work every contact I can to say, listen, this is a long-term process, and this is a commitment for me, and if you support me, it's a commitment for you, because I'm not asking for money, but I will be asking for support and, whatever funds I can get down the road for re-election. So I've made that very clear, and I made it clear to Mr. Nordby as well, that I know this is a long-term process, and I know it involves a community as well as myself, and it involves every political contact, or someone who's higher up, and I've personally gone out and taken the initiative to try to reach out to folks, and I think I've broadened that. And I think I've strengthened that since my interview.
Anyone else? Bryan, thank you for coming in.
No, thank you all for having me. I appreciate it. Thank you.
As you know, we'll let everyone know by the end of the day.
Yes, thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you all for your time. Thank you. Thank you.